Welcome back, everybody. We are in for a treat. Traci Nathans-Kelly is going to be talking to us about how to make our presentations better, stickier, more interesting, more engaging, all of the good stuff. When we were planning this mini conference, I reached out immediately to Traci because, Traci, I don't know if you're aware, but you are our most frequently viewed presentation. The presentation that you did for us a couple years ago is the most frequently viewed presentation on our YouTube channel. So
isn't that interesting? Well, thanks for letting me know.
how about that? You have fans in our Society for Technical Communication, Instructional Design and Learning Special Interest Group, our IDL SIG. But you also have lots of fans outside of our little cocoon. And so we are really, really happy that you could be with us this afternoon and share your superpowers with us.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Well, my setup here, we were just talking about having an extra monitor, and I do have an extra monitor, but you can see me chugging on this coffee here. I'm battling a migraine, and so I'm not going to do well multitasking. So if you leave a question in the chat, we'll get to it at the end. I just wanted to put that out there because my eyeballs won't allow for much more action than that. But I wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for having me in again. It's always so much fun. Can everybody, I can't tell what you can see versus what I can see. Can you see the whole slide, or is the panel covering it up?
No, you see the whole slide.
You can. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to be sure.
It looks beautiful.
Go ahead.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you. It's a raven. How could it not? So I just wanted to foreground this, that I come from a place where people do pretty traditional slides, right? So engineering. And yes, I teach at a university and I teach undergrads, but I also teach practicing professional engineers, technical people, bankers, everything in between. And I've been doing this for almost 30 years now. And along the way, my colleague, Christine Nicometto, and I have stumbled upon something that really works well for those of you who have to develop message pieces or training pieces. I won't touch much on the training stuff there, but if we wanted to someday do another moment where we talk about creating presentations specifically for training, we could certainly do that. But I just wanted to focus on, because it was about what's something that scares you, right? That you want to become a little bit better at. And I wanted to focus on reintroducing slides so that they better support you in the moment. I think a lot of anxiety comes up when people start like, oh, I have to give a talk, I better design my slides. And they let that take foreground. So playing into that impulse that we all now have to deal with our slides first, I wanted to hit that low-hanging fruit, because when we talk about the way that we design slides, it can actually diminish your anxiety levels, even at the physical level. It's really quite interesting what can happen if we use slightly different strategies. So that's where I'm going to be addressing topics today. So I love ravens, love blackbirds, all those good things, but people often associate them with dark things like Halloween. But ancient lore says ravens are birds of wisdom and transformation. Many of the same associations with crows and other blackbirds, and so that's why I love it. I choose it. I have them all around me. And today, let's talk about getting your best foot forward if you're afraid of doing presentations, or if you feel like you're doing battle against your own slides, which happens to quite a few people. And that, again, raises the anxiety. Like, I'm not quite who I want to be in front of my colleagues or in front of clients. And part of that is because we have some really bad models, and we're going to break those down. So I'm hoping that by the end, you'll be able to have more authentic interactions with your audience. I hope to heavens you won't be reading any more bullets ever. I hope that your distilled messages, whatever those are, you could have one point or many, can come across for all your people. But let's talk about what is going on that makes everybody so afraid. Because, there's that old acorn of, the thing that people are the most afraid of in the world is giving a public speech. And I'm not sure that that's exactly true anymore because we do a lot of it, but I know it does raise anxiety for a lot of people. But the problem is usually not the people. It's what the slide templates are forcing them to do. And it makes me mad. And so I have a mad bird. And so a lot of people are like, well, how do we get to this ugly place? And if you're new and you haven't thought about these things in quite this way, well, let's break it down. That's really what I want to do. Because slides were invented from the idea of the index card. And so slideware initially was meant to be an electronic way for you to shuffle index cards. So, we used to, back in the old days, we put all of our talking points on these index cards, and then we would shuffle those main points around until it felt like the order was in place, like we wanted it. That's what PowerPoint was meant to do initially. And then somebody said, well, let's throw it on the wall. And Guy Kawasaki said, well, let's add bullets. And now we're in this hellscape is what happened. Because if you look at the slide template, it is, here's my cranky bird. This is early, see 87, early PowerPoint. But if you look at the template for slides now, it is an index card, right? They just took that same pattern. So the inventors were not really concerned about how we transferred information at all. Their early impulse was to get the technology right. So there was a lot of stuff going on here with graphics cards and so forth. And that was really their main focus, not creating a tool that really did help you teach well or communicate well or connect well. That wasn't their goal. They do say they wish it was their goal now because they realize a lot of things have happened. So what has happened? We get a slide at the top and we get a one-word header. And then we get bullets full of whatever. And I just put ravens in here versus lorem ipsum, but you get the point. This is how most slides are. I would guess about 85% of slides look somewhat like this. In real emails or in real slides, right? Like this is what they look like because of the template. And the template says, click here to add header, click here to add text. And so people are very obedient, especially in my field in engineering. They like the rules. They're awesome, right? And so people click here and they fill in their text. Well, what this does, and Rachel was getting at this too, is it absolutely overwhelms the audience. And it not only overwhelms the audience, it overwhelms the speaker as well, because now the speaker feels very beholden to read every single one of these words in that exact order. And what that does is it kills authenticity. It kills any sense that you may have of spontaneity, of the exchange of ideas. All of that goes out the window as soon as you start to read your slides. And if you build slides like this, it's almost inevitable that you'll be reading them, whether you mean to or not, right? So this is another one. And these little beanie guys, people are still using these beanies for their visuals. Don't ever use one of those. And this one I do like in that it has on the left-hand side here, you can see kind of like a progress bar. And that's the way of telling people where we are on the agenda for the day, which is kind of a nice idea. But I was really focusing on this fragmented header and all of these bullets and unnecessarily in kind of weird graphic. Here's just another version of the same exact thing, right? So this is really the same thing as this. They're doing exactly the same gesture. And this is what we want to avoid. Even the most wonderful new version. So this is beautiful AI. And it looks like really snazzy and it'll give you templates that are beautiful, frankly. I mean, I look at them for inspiration all the time. I never use them. Because if you look at the templates that they're showing us, they're promoting all of the same bad habits. And in this case, the fonts are often gray and they're often very small. And so not very accessible, not very useful, and they certainly don't project well on a wall for people to be able to read that super small font. So even in the most, Prezi does the same thing. In the most innovative things that we think we have in order to make presentations, they are still following those old school habits that were born in 1987. Some people use graphics, and that's a great idea unless you end up with something like this. Right, this is a nightmare. Nobody can read it. And this is an original version of it, right, as it was given to me. So you expect to be able to decode this. Even if I printed this out big and put it on my wall, I don't think I'd be able to read all of those teeny tiny words. So graphics are good, but they have to be tempered. This is not good, right? It's a lot of stats, and it's just weird. So something like this is too complex. This is not useful. So if we were comparing, go ahead.
Comic Sans.
Yeah, right.
It's just got everything.
It's got it all, and then not even dealing with the issue of color blindness, right?
Right.
Is here. At least they have redundancy. They have labeled every single slice, but it's still a mess. And so if your point is maybe you're working for Ford, right? We have 18% of the market share. You should have one slide for Ford, or one slice for Ford at 18.0%, and then everybody else is one slice. That's it. Unless you were trying to look specifically how are we doing against Fiat, right? Then show 3 slices. But this is too much, and it's so overwhelming that it just collapses in upon itself. If you're the speaker, people are going to be looking at all those slices, trying to decode it against the legend, also reading that paragraph, none of which allows them to also listen to you at the same time. So what we want to do is recenter the speaker. We don't need hoo-ha like that. This was created by a colleague of mine named Carl. He was so proud of it. And he showed it to me, and I said, yeah, don't ever do that again. And then we had a good laugh, and I helped him work through how this can work a little bit better inside a presentation. But what often happens is that we sideline ourselves. We make slides that pull the attention away from us as the subject matter experts in the room. And then in some rooms themselves, they force you to be sidelined and in the dark. My husband took this picture. He's a videographer at conferences. And he's like, you can't even believe this poor speaker and what he's having to deal with. It was really bad. So what I would wish for you instead is to be in well-lit rooms or well-lit spaces online, to be facing your audience, be totally engaged. Look how she's in the center of the room. Everybody's looking at her. And to Rachel's point, there's not a lot of stuff going on the screen, right? There's no overwhelm. And everybody's engaged, authentically engaged. Look, like not a single person is declining to be engaged here. So we want you to be able to simplify what's on your slides, turn around, face your people, and be in control. And that will lessen your fear a little bit. I think a lot of people get nervous because they make the traditional old slides and they have to fill in all the imaginary questions. So if you give a fragmented header, a one-word header, results, in your mind, you're thinking, I hope I answer all those questions. Are other questions going to be answered? I don't know. And what if they get mad? And what if, right? And we're asking ourselves, is this going to be okay for them? And they're wondering, what does that mean? And they start internally asking themselves a bunch of questions because it's just a one-word header. And so it prompts a lot of musing, questioning internal, right? And problems with these very short or fragmented headers. And then to have the rest of the acreage be a little bit too busy or full of bullets, it doesn't serve your purpose. It doesn't give you any authority in the room. And that's what we want. Even if you're faking it, right? Fake it till you make it. We are there to see you do a talk. Everybody's gathered. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be human and tell us something that maybe we hadn't thought about before. That's it. So we want to get rid of this idea that our slides are teleprompters and get more towards the idea that the slides are like jumbotrons. My friend Ken took this picture at a Springsteen concert. And so I like to make this analogy. If we went to these tickets are expensive, right? Bruce is not a cheap show. If we go to a concert and Springsteen comes out on stage, gets everybody fired up, then turns around and reads the lyrics to all of his songs with his back to the audience and reading the lyrics off the Jumbotron, we all would want our money back, right? That's what's happening in our talks. People want their money back. They want their time back because they're not being inspired or even feel like they've learned much. So how are we going to fix it? First one, this is the hardest one for most people, sentence headers. So here's a typical one. This is from engineers working with Lockheed Martin or Boeing, I don't remember. So stow bins are those things that hold our luggage above our head when we're in the airplane. They were going through a redesign, and he sent me this, and he's like, hey, help me. This slide doesn't seem to be doing very much. I'm like, yeah, it's a nightmare, right? So we have one word at the top, stow. It should have even been pluralized, right? Stow bins. And then this weird font, and I asked him, why did you choose, what is this font? What is happening here? And he goes, well, I thought it looked technical. I would rather have you use Comic Sans than this, right? Because it's threaded, but the spacing is all weird. It's really hard to read. But then, of course, here's this huge list. But let's just focus right now on that header. When we have a fragmented header, we are letting our own mind race a little bit. Am I going to answer every question that could possibly be answered under the topic of stow bins? Or what questions are surfacing for the people paying attention with this one word header? What about them? Are we changing them? Are we not changing them? What's the new material? Do we have it? Is it cheaper? Is it better? Has it been strength tested? Do I need to run new tests on all these strength things according to the new nuts and bolts I just ordered? Right. So all these things start to surface because people want to know how the information you have affects their workflow. And if you have a fragment at the top, you are not helping them to move forward. And that's what we want to do. So we're not going to do one word headers anymore. Instead, this is a nice slide from a colleague in the EU, Joss Dings, and he does the work where two roads come together between two different countries. And so the pavement has to be consistent so that there's not any car wrecks, right? When you move between one country and the other one in the EU. Do we know how Joss thinks about weight-based standards for doing these calculations? Yes. Joss is saying, we're not going to do it this way. And then he goes on to explain in his talk why, using the calculations, the methods for calculation on this, it is a bad idea. But the main idea is up there, and that's really all we need to know. It's a bad idea. And so, of course, later in the talk, he brings us the corrected idea that works a little bit better. So that's what we want, a full sentence, subject, verb, object. Y'all are language people. I don't have to explain what that means. I often have to explain what that means. You can have or punctuation at the end or not, just be consistent about it. And that's the goal. So what happens is instead of one word, we have a full idea. So you talk about this one key area of improvement. And by having a full sentence there, instead of just analysis, so the word just analysis would be, everybody starts to worry. How many things broke down? Am I going to have to order more things? Do we have to hire somebody else? But they start asking all these questions internally. What does this mean? And if you say instead, it shows we just have one big thing we need to deal with. Everybody relaxes, right? Nobody is keyed up and they can listen to the solution. If they know it's 3 areas of improvement, 47 areas of improvement, it's fine. At least now they can put a fence around it and be able to start to deal with it mentally. And so the other, whoops, sorry about that. So let's look at this one. This is a typical kind of thing that I work with all the time with my engineers. So see at the top, it says results. It's a comparison of estimation methods. So that's still a fragment. And then, of course, they included the title of the chart as well, which is redundant. better editing could happen. But the thing is, with this, it looks fine. It looks almost like a sentence header, right? But there's no footer. And what this prompts is, again, all those kinds of questions. So the result is not the comparison. The result is the result of the comparisons. And so what we want to say instead is, what did the comparison tell us about these estimation methods? Don't say results and then say we did a comparison. That's not a result. That's the method. And so we want to do something different. What happened? Well, we figured out they validated cross-functionally, thumbs up, we're ready to move to the next step. This provides so much more ease, and it, again, allows everybody to relax a little bit. Whether it was bad news or good news, at least they have the full idea in one simple sentence, and then use the rest of the acreage to provide some sort of visual if you can. So in some cases, you're not going to have a data visual. You have a complete sentence with a claim, and you can have a visual that pertains to that particular one. I always love those little ball rubrics. What are these called? Like, it's not a Rube Goldberg, but it's kind of like it, right? I always think they're so much fun. So you have a full sentence idea and you have a visual that supports it. And the reason you want to have a visual, if at all possible, is, of course, we are visual learners. Even those of us who are blind, we imagine what we have in the pictures themselves. So we want to just like really pay attention to that sentence header and then provide support to it. This one is always right. Like, this is wild. This is a software output. This is ocean spray. I always just think cranberries. So that's why they're talking about acres, and they're talking about how much hydration is typical in this particular crop when it was harvested. And we were looking at acre T2, and and my informant here, my engineer, he really wanted the managers to, there's something going on with this, the third acre, the acre T3. And he was pointing something out, but he knew his managers would not be able to read this output screenshot, right? So he adds that arrow to show them exactly where to look. No laser pointers. Laser pointers do not travel with the slide deck. They are very difficult for people with vision problems. People abuse their laser pointers, right? There's all kinds of things, but use a shape instead and show people exactly where to look. This will archive with the slides and it will travel on into the future. A laser pointer won't do that for you. So sentence header, visual, anyway. Sentence header here again. Right, so all of these flavors can play. Sentence headers don't always have to be at the top, like the one with the little girl. We saw that the sentence header was over to the side. That's fine. It's all good. But it really does square up one idea per slide. And does that make you sometimes have to have more slides? Yes. But most of the time, your constraint is not the number of slides, it's how long you have. So if you're moving quickly through a whole lot of slides, that's fine. You're going to stay in your time constraint. And if those consecutive multiple slides build a case slowly, one by one, rather than overwhelming people with really complicated slides, that's better. So think about it in terms of how much time do I have? People ask me all the time, how many slides are the right number of slides? There is no right number of slides. It's how well you build the information incrementally, including this sentence header, and staying within your time constraints. So let's look back at those optimized visuals again. I was showing you a few. Well, this one comes right out. Let's go back. This is this slide. If you have a big, great, awesome picture, this one's a little pixely, but you can use the great photo that you have and take it corner to corner. And your sentence header can be kind of in a space that's less important than other spaces, and it can be put on top of the visual. Rather than having the header at the top and having the visual kind of be small and off to the side. Reverse that. Show us exactly where to look and what to think about it when we are looking there. So you can see what this does is it allows you to say, so as you can see here, and you're turned around, you're interacting with your people because there are no bullets to read. You know this. You know your technical information. You know your business information. You don't need to read it off of bullets. And so let yourself be more authentic in that way. Now, this is either a beautiful AI, it could also be a Canva, I'm not sure. So the graphic looks great, right? Who doesn't love big giant sun and here's little tiny earth way back when? But I would argue this is not a sentence header, this is multiple sentences and it's too much. What I would do instead is I would keep this graphic, love it, and I would bring in the first sentence and work through that information, talk through it. Then bring in the second sentence, work through that information. Then the third, but not all at once. Because if you bring it in all at once, then people are going to be reading that and not paying attention to you. There's another mock-up that somebody had. Again, that fragment header at the top, things that are technically bullets over on the side and a picture in between. So let's change that up. Let's get back to we want an assertion, claim up in our header, full sentence, and we want some evidence in the body of the slide. There we go. Something like that. Right? Those of you who know more about self-driving cars, you would have a better header than I would. This is a great one from an undergrad that I had. They were working on water pumps for these parts of the United States that are not served well. And so great sentence header, a perfect map of Texas, and then no laser, but they give us a little red, like what's the community that they were dealing with? Where was it located? So it helps us find, like, where are we? What are we doing? What state? Oh, and look, we're right here. And so really just keep pulling in the information tighter and tighter. Sentence header on the side, which is great. This is an unusual case because this is 3 sentence headers on one page. But if you notice, I was talking earlier about build your case or layer in information. So this is about plastics on CDs or DVDs and how they can deteriorate. That's what this project was on. And so if you look under a microscope, these plastics on CDs and DVDs look very much like spaghetti. They're all tangled up and stuff. I always thought they would be so tidy and, like, you know, round, spiraled. No, I guess that's not the case. So the student was talking about, you know, the surface is undamaged and showed us a nice, lovely pile of spaghetti, right? That's what my kid calls it. And then we see damage right to the surface. And then at the end, we have failure, we have breakage. This, for the student, was all one slide, and they did it with animations and shading. I would encourage you to do it as 3 slides across the way, but either way will work just fine. But that very guided layering or building of the case or building of information, it was absolutely brilliant here. When I asked the student where he got the stock photography of spaghetti doing exactly this, he said, yeah, no, that's my kitchen counter, and we ate it for dinner after I was done taking these pictures. Right? Students never have enough money. So sometimes, and Rachel was talking about this too, sometimes you just don't even want any words on there because the image that you have is so stunning. And a case would be like this, right? You don't even want written words to take away from this microscopic image and how wonderful it is. So we're going to rely on you to tell us, and you're going to give us all this information. Now, I know a lot of people are nervous, like, but I need all the information to be on the slides and it needs to be there so that other people can use it later. That's what the notes pane is for. Okay. There's 2 lives for your slides. There's the live presentation, and then there's the archival version. And that's where we'll see all of your notes down in that notes pane. They don't need to be on the slide in order to travel with the slide file. So use that notes pane. I've been asked this like 20 times in the last week. I guess I've been dealing with a lot of grad students and practitioners they're getting close to doing their end of annual year, you know, data. And so they're worried about boring graphs because, you know, sometimes in the technical fields, we end up with pieces like this or equations or other kinds of, you know, especially getting into the fourth quarter, all kinds of money graphics. But, you know, you're not there to entertain people. You're there to inform them. So we're going to have our really great sentence header up top talking about the technical bit. And if you want to get people to focus, then we're going to use, in this case, they used a red square. Like, I'm going to look at this span again because something interesting was happening here. So we take people's eyes to it, and then we can add, this is like a second sentence header, right? And they used a speech bubble instead of an arrow. I thought it worked out great. So you would bring these in one by one and build the case and build the information. And in this case, they're like, here's everything. And now let's narrow. And that was the really nice move there. So again, sometimes you don't need to have any sentence headers at all. We're going to have, you know, a picture of whatever activity it was and did this play out. They were worried about interest going down by 10% rather than interest going up for this particular report. And they just wanted to talk about that and brainstorm it, so they didn't put a sentence header there. So that worked out great. Right, these are the bad graphs that make us worried. This should make us worried. This is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for accessibility. What does it mean? It has no meaning attached to it. The color blindness issue is all over the place. It's ugly. They're using the defaults in Microsoft. It's just bad. And it can get worse with just one click. But, right, if you choose a different chart type, this is what you might end up with. Never, ever use 3D on your slides. You can see by using 3D, fake 3D, we're losing here, I would say, probably 80% of the information because we just can't see it in this modality. We can see all of it in this modality, but then all the numbers are there, right? It turns into a nightmare. So be very discerning about how you put your numbers out there. Get them as stripped down and as meaningful as possible, right? Just another one-click version of bad. If you want to take your bad, right? Like what you have is bad, but do like that person did before. Okay, now let's focus because something interesting happened right here, right? There was that little spike we can see in our transmitter right at the end. So what happened right there to bump that transmitter up in that moment between 10:30 and 10:52? So they're going to show, like, we've got this whole range of data, and now we're going to focus in on this particular one. So this is that data in the slice stretched out. So now we can see. Okay, our audience will know from before. Our audience will know from before that there was a lot going on. We're going to drill down, look closely, and here's that close look. And now we can pull apart what was happening there. So don't be afraid to like really tell the story if it's complicated in a particular way that allows the information to build. I've been mentioning color blindness. This is just an example that I was shown a couple of weeks ago. And so at first glance, it looks like everything that is a star, so more over on our left side, it looks like all the stars are green and all the pluses are reds. But then when we get into that middle area, that's no longer true because now some of our pluses have become green. But I don't think we have any stars. Oh yeah, we do have stars that turn red. So the problem here is that if all stars were green and all pluses were red, we'd be okay because the redundancy, there's shape plus color, and that is consistent. However, because at a certain point in this midsection, stars and pluses start to flip colors, we cannot rely on color to be our sole indicator anymore of meaning. Because what happens to folks with color blindness, I'll show you what this middle section looks like to them. So if you've got the red-green color blindness, that information basically collapses into the same color of, what is this, maize, puce? I don't know what color this is. You can see like it gets really bad very quickly. There's no way to really tell these things apart, these values apart. So always, if you have charts and numbers, make sure you've got some redundancy in there if it falls apart. And I can put, when we get near the end, I'll put a color blindness checker that you can use for all of your graphics in the chat. So I'm really encouraging you to try these techniques. Michael Alley calls it the assertion evidence model. So you make an assertion and you provide us with some sort of evidence in the middle acreage or majority acreage of each slide. And by allowing yourself to make assertions, to make claims all the way through your talk, you are going to be more centered. Your information, your story, your technical story, whatever that might be, is going to make more sense. Because if you just read the sentences, they're going to flow if you've organized it correctly. It's going to tell the tale if you just read those sentence headers. It's a really nice trick. Helps you with organization as well. And then the visuals allow both you and the audience members to like get an idea cemented visually in their head. It will allow them to remember, like, what was that one slide where you had the penguin, right? They'll remember which one to go back to if they have questions, and it'll really mark. And then as a side note, if you're nervous about losing everything that you've had in your bullets, use the notes pane. That's the big trick, because I don't want you to be this guy, right? This breaks my heart. This is devaluing this subject matter expert who's either paid a lot of money or has been paid a lot of money to be there, to sit in a dark room and just like everybody stare at some slides and he's off in a corner by himself, right? This is sad. This is not good. What we want instead is this true engagement where you are in a room with other smart people, you're training them or whatever, and your personal presence is what they're after. So use, just like she's doing here, use that slide as a jumbotron. It's your background. They're there to see you. They're not there to read your slides. And that's really where I wanted to let off today, and then just kind of open this up to a discussion. Sorry, I had to run through everything so quickly.
So
go ahead, Vicki.
Yeah, so I was thinking, just looking at the last slide of the sad presenter, I do come from an environment where they like to have the nice busy slides, and that way it doesn't matter who presents. The person who presents can not be an expert in the situation. That tends to happen with HR presentations.
Yeah.
You know, I need to discuss these 3 things. I need to say this exact.
Yeah. Sometimes
phrasing.
wording's important. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I've heard that called is PowerPoint karaoke, where you basically, there's a lyric.
I love that.
And I understand why and where it's coming from, but really, if you need a consistent message, have somebody that knows the material really well just make a video, right?
It's true.
That's
become so much easier in the last 3 or 4 years, right? We can hop on a Zoom and make a video. And I use Loom all the time. I make little short videos all the time with Loom. So I absolutely agree. It's good idea.
But they like to witness, especially in the HR training, they like to witness you in the seat with your eyes on the screen so that we can say, yes, Vicki has had, that particular training. Yeah.
And I would say to those really busy slides, keep them, right? I mean, if that's the culture, you can keep them if you don't feel empowered to like change it up or, do a whole reset for everybody. But maybe think about layering in things. So if you've got 3 main things you have to say word for word, right? Because it's HR or something, bring in the first one, work everybody through it. Then the second one, right? And don't let people read ahead. Like that's one of my big things. Don't let people read ahead, because then they start fighting with you and you're not even there yet.
Right. Well, or what about a handout, especially if it's an in-person thing? You could have your details on the handout and then have the important stuff that you can talk to. And then you would, anyway,
Yep.
was just thinking a good handout. I was feeling sad for our presenter in the last slide, and I was saying, maybe you could have good slides for the Jumbotron,
Yeah.
and then have a handout that covers all the things that you
Absolutely.
need.
And so what I would say is put all the extra things that you might need down in that notes pane. And then if you're going to make a handout, you print to PDF, right? Or print, and you print with the notes turned on. So the page will have the slide up at the top, which might be important because it's got a graph on it or something, right? And then as many notes as you want. You can write a damn novel if you want there. You'll just go on to the next page. I've had lots of people, they'll just copy paste out of their technical reports, long, right into the notes pane, and they'll have their citations or whatever they need also in that notes pane. And that becomes their handout, so nobody can miss anything. Right? If they see those notes printed, they have no excuse like, oh, I just didn't see that, they have it all. They have a complete package in that way. So,
I really like how you described like the assertion evidence model. Like that makes like it really clicked for me when you said it that way. Have you found that when you are planning or making a presentation with that model in mind, does your like thought process change, or the process in planning it? Like, is there a shift from like thinking in points to like assertions, if that makes sense?
So it took me a long time, right? So I've been doing it this way for a long time, but at first I was like, oh my God, this sucks because it takes so long, right? And that's what I get the first time through. You're like, oh, it just takes so long. It's because it's your first time. It's like doing, your first quadratic equation. It takes a long time, and then you're good at it in just a few minutes. So like everybody else, I start with slides. I start with fragments, right? It's a mess, just like everybody else. And then I start moving things around. And then when I think about my audience, what is my point? Then I start writing my sentence headers. And so the really nice thing, if you're used to, I need to plug in my computer before I lose all of you. The really nice thing is that outline view. So if you can do the outline view every now and again, right? Like some of your slides have sentence headers and some don't. Look at the outline view. And like I said, you really should be able to read it like a story. And that's where those sentence headers are like pure gold, because they can see your logical moves. They can see, I'm really afraid of my computer just like turning off, and it doesn't want to charge. I don't know what's happening. Oh wait, there we go. And so if you read those sentence headers, you'll see in a moment's notice, oh wait, no, I got to move that down here, because your sentence header now makes sense, but not quite right there. Right? It's like having, I don't know, it's like having a chapter in the wrong place in a book, right? It got bound wrong. You'll see it right away. And it really helps organize, which of course takes your prep time way down if you've got a good organization. And a good organization will also really allow fewer people to come to you for a follow-up because it made sense. So it kind of cuts down, I found, on that bit of the work too.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Anne-Marie, what's up?
Yeah, I can't lower the hand, sorry. I have a question about the timing if you do use handouts, because then you have the risk of people like looking ahead anyway, because now they have the handouts. So how do you handle it? Do you do it after, just say to people, you'll have all the information after the presentation, but sometimes people like to take notes. So how do you balance that?
So I've been damaged a lot by undergrads. So I never give out the notes beforehand unless I have a person who needs some ADA accommodations, right? They need to have it translated or through a screen reader or something. In that case, of course, right? But I don't do it before. I think in most places, people are like, yeah, you'll be able to find my slides online in the project management folder, right? Or whatever. The other reason I don't is that sometimes during a talk, now let me share my screen again. Yes, just share my screen. So if I'm giving a talk and somebody makes a point and I'm like, you know what, I need to capture that, right? I'll go down and I'll go out. And so now I'm in editing mode, you can see. And Marie asked, right? Blah, blah, blah. And then I can capture what it was that you asked. Okay. This is really helpful too if somebody's feeling a little contentious. So you open it up and you're like, that's a great question. Let me write that down so I know it goes with this topic, and then I'm going to follow up with you or something like this. So I often use slides as kind of a dynamic note taker for me in the moment. Okay, so that said, that is also a reason I wouldn't send it out until afterwards. So that everybody who had questions, they saw me write them down, they know there's going to be some follow-up, they feel heard, which is another plus, because you wrote down their words. And now I can freeze that and I can, put it in my project management folder or whatever. I tend to be an after person. If they want to take notes, they've got pens and papers and little devices. They're fine.
Yeah.
That's just
okay. Great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. How's everybody doing?
No, I've really, really enjoyed your presentation. It's getting me to rethink everything. And it's not in the sense of, no, you're fine. In the sense of just making sure that I know what I'm doing. And so it's good. I'm not going to change anything from my presentation today, but it's good. It's good.
It's fine. I hear that all the time. What happens is people will try, just try a few slides, right? Just try it on. And then you'll find your own style. You'll find your own pace. You'll find your own aesthetic. Even if you have to use a template, there's still ways to play and a way to make the slides serve you and your information sharing goals. So many templates are so bad. And we actually have a chapter in our book, I think it's chapter 9, on battling templates. Right? It's just a boss battle all the time. Because they're often not crafted with learning, pedagogy, how the brain functions, right? We know so much about how the brain takes in information now, and none of those templates have ever been made with that in mind. So you really have to override a lot of things. But yeah, the big idea, one main point. And if you don't have any visual evidence, sometimes that's the case, then your header, just put it in the middle slide. That's your visual, let it stand and be a big, bold statement, which is great. So I've put the seed out there. You can find me through Vicky. I have to bolt in just a few minutes, just like Rachel had. I feel sorry about that. But Vicky knows how to get a hold of me. I'm easy to, there's only 3 Nathans Kellys in the whole world. I'm not really hard to find. You're free to find me on LinkedIn and ask some questions. I'm always willing to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, we have a link in the Eventbrite page to your.
I thought so. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I'll leave you with that. You can walk around with assertion evidence in your brains now.
All right. Thank you so much. I think
you.
it's good for the thunderous applause again.
Thanks. I can stay on for a few minutes until 2:45, so I will do that.
Well, I'm going to pause the recording then.